They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
What's up, everybody? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe. And before we get into it today, I do want to let you guys know that I am going out of town this weekend. I'm going out with my family into the nature a little bit, get away from people. We're gonna stay, stay virus-free. Being away from people, getting out into nature and stuff. But I will be away from home for the weekend, so I'm gonna pre-record a couple of videos for you guys for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday are all going to be pre-recorded episodes. I'm going to, record extra over the next couple of days in order to get some stuff out. So I'm going to be talking about a couple of topics that are not necessarily time sensitive for the NBA. We're not going to do our normal, talk about whatever's going on for the week and certain teams are playing good or bad or whatever. It's just going to be some more, generic topics that can just be relevant in any time period. So if there is any information in those that is not relevant at the time that they're uploaded, that's why I'm pre-recording for this weekend. But there will still be videos up, just so you guys know that is what's going on. So today I wanted to talk about OKC, and they have been perhaps the most surprising team in the NBA so far. There's been a couple of early season surprises, good and bad, both ways, right? But the Thunder are a team that many people expected to suck, and rightfully so, right? They pretty much traded everybody away. They have a brand new roster of, still Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is around, and then a bunch of just random guys collected from around the league, just thrown around him, and a bunch of young guys and a bunch of draft picks, right? So the Thunder have again completely remodeled their roster, and it's pretty similar to what they did last year, where nobody really thought they would make the playoffs. We're all familiar with that graphic that was shown at the beginning of the season that had them with a 1% chance to make the postseason, and that ended up happening. And not only did they make the playoffs, but they were the 5th seed and almost won in the first round. They almost had a first round upset of the Houston Rockets. It was a close 7-game series. So the Thunder clearly overperformed and exceeded expectations last year, and then this season they traded away a lot of those players that were key to what they did last season, and they, rebuilt the entire roster again, and it was a little bit more of an aggressive tank job, right? It's okay, this team is clearly not trying to be very good this year. They're just going to kind of take a step back, accumulate a lot of draft picks, try to have their own pick be as high as possible this year, and focus on developing their youth. But so far, that has not quite been the case. They are now 5-5 through 10 games, and they don't look like the worst team in the league. And this is something that I had sort of seen coming. I wasn't super bold with this in my preseason predictions video. I maybe should have gone a little bit more on the side of, hey, the Thunder might win more games than people think, because I really did believe that the Thunder are going to be a little bit surprising. But I don't know. On paper, the roster isn't awesome, but you got to take into account the culture of this team over the past couple of years and the veterans that they do have, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about right now. So above me, you'll see their record. Like I said, they're 5-5 with wins against the Hornets, the Magic, the Pelicans, the Knicks, and the Nets. So there's a couple pretty impressive wins in there, right? You would expect that the Pelicans are going to be fighting for the playoffs this year. Magic and the Hornets, the same thing. The Brooklyn Nets, that was without Kyrie Irving, but that was, they did have Kevin Durant for that game. And then the Knicks, who have been, impressive in their own right through their first couple of games this year. So it's not like they're just beating bad teams, and they're, mostly remaining competitive in their other games here. You can see they lost by 10 to the Spurs today. There's a 1-point loss against the Jazz in their second game of the year. The Magic game was relatively close, and so they've had a couple of close ones, and they've been competitive, right? And so for the Thunder here, it's mostly been on the back of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who has taken another leap in his third year. I picked him to win the Most Improved Player award, and I think he's got a very good chance to do that, just with an increased opportunity in his role and everything. And not only that, but they do have a couple of veterans around him here, most specifically Al Horford and George Hill. Horford is a guy who a lot of people completely had written off after last year, and honestly that's pretty understandable considering the season that he had with Philadelphia, but we're forgetting how good he was in Boston a couple of years ago, and of course with the Hawks when he was an all-star multiple times, right? And so Al Horford, while he's obviously not the player that he once was, he's getting up there in age, he's still a very good defender. He can knock down some shots for you, and he's got that veteran leadership. And so So far, he's been pretty good for them, as well as George Hill, who is coming off, one of the better seasons of his career with the Bucks. He's become one of those veterans who has become a really, really good three-point shooter. He's good defensively. He can pass the ball as well, and he's going to be another good mentor for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to learn from. Another point guard for him to study from and learn from, just like Chris Paul last year, as well as Dennis Schroeder, and now George Hill. So Gilgeous-Alexander here has had a nice set of veterans to open up his career, and that's going to pay dividends for him as he gets older and starts to get even better. And that's really the key thing here, as well as Lu Dort playing super well, right? He not only has been awesome defensively, but is also knocking down shots on offense. He's shooting really, really well from three right now. Who knows if he can keep that up, whether or not that three is actually something he's added to his game over the offseason, or if it's just a hot shooting streak to begin the year. Who knows, right? But hopefully for the Thunder and for their fans, Lu Dort can actually, become consistent on offense, because that's something that he wasn't super good at the first season of his career, in his rookie year, other than that Game 7 against the Houston Rockets. So they have this weird mix of veterans and young talent. And, I talked about the veterans, but they also have these young guys like Pokashevsky, who has been, okay so far. He's still very, very young and such a raw prospect. Who knows what he's going to turn into, as well as guys like Teo Maledon and Darius Bazley. And you've just got a lot of guys on this roster that are fighting for playing time here. And it's just this weird mix of veterans and young guys, but for some reason it's working. And I think the main thing here is the culture that the Thunder have built over the past couple of years, because now this is the first, well, I guess not the first, this is now the second year of a Thunder team without Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant and James Harden, right? They had that core trio a couple of years ago, I guess more than a couple at this point, in the early 2010s, before they traded away James Harden and all that. Obviously, we know what happened with Kevin Durant, and then eventually trading Russell Westbrook away. But ever since they've been the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? They've had Durant and Westbrook in uniform since back when they were the Supersonics. At least Durant played his rookie year with the Sonics, and then Westbrook, I believe, was drafted the offseason that they moved to Oklahoma City. So they've had those guys around for a long, long time. And they've never really had any losing seasons with those guys on the roster, right? They've had a good team ever since they've been in OKC. I think they only had one losing year, and that was the year Durant broke his foot, if I'm not wrong. They had one pretty mediocre season with Durant hurt. But other than that, this Thunder team, all they've done is win, win, win. And I really feel like they've built a culture over there of not tanking, of maximizing their players, and like they've changed coaches now with Mark Daigneault in there instead of Billy Donovan, as well as the transition previously from Scott Brooks to Billy Donovan, and they switched all their coaches around, and now they have a whole new roster of players. They switched their point guard, going from Westbrook now to Chris Paul, and then to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as their full-time guard. So it's just been a weird transition here for OKC, and they've never really been a losing franchise, and so maybe things fall apart for them later in the year, and they come back down to earth and start playing to what their talent level actually suggests that they should. But I don't think there's a way to overstate the impact that culture has on teams. Team culture and a winning tradition is definitely having a huge impact on the way that this Thunder roster is playing right now. And I certainly think that that's something that can carry them throughout the whole year. Now, do they really want to do that is the other question, right? Because last season, if you remember, there was a lot of talk around, well, OKC is just going to trade off all these guys by the deadline, right? They had Chris Paul, Steven Adams, Gallinari, Schroeder, a couple of other guys on that roster, right? And it was like, well, this team's probably not going to be very good. Maybe they want to sell off some of these pieces around the deadline and see what they can get back for them and enter their rebuild. They ended up waiting until the offseason, right? And it ended up being a pretty good move for them, because they ended up getting into the playoffs and being competitive, and it was an exciting season for the team. And they still were able to trade all those guys away, with the exception of Gallinari, who had an expiring contract. He left in free agency. They didn't end up working out a sign and trade with him. But still, they had, they ended up trading Chris Paul for value. They traded Steven Adams for value. They traded Dennis Schroeder for value, as well as, trading away the pieces that they got from Chris Paul for value, right? Flipping Ricky Rubio and Kelly Oubre for even more picks. So they did enter their rebuild here, just not quite as quickly as some people thought they might, right? They thought it might happen last season and at the deadline, and it didn't. And now they've done it, right? So that signals to me that this team is pretty clearly not trying to win a ton of games this year. They might, just because, like I said, the culture aspect and the roster is a little bit better than some people might assume here. But they're probably not trying. And if I'm Sam Presti, what do you do at the trade deadline if, say, you're around 500, maybe a little bit better, maybe a little worse, but you're hanging around there, you're not like a bottom 5 team, and you really want to try to get that top draft pick? Do you consider, what can you get back for George Hill? I'm sure there's probably some people at the deadline who are going to, inquire about George Hill, and maybe you can get another pick back for him. Do you want to do that? Probably, right? Do you want to see if you can trade away Al Horford? Now, who knows, any team might be willing to take on that contract, but if there's an offer out there for Al Horford, maybe you want to try to flip him. Trevor Ariza is still on this roster. He has not played this season. I believe he's still away from the team on personal business, but eventually if he does come back, or you still have that contract, you want to try to flip him away at the deadline, that's an expiring deal. You could probably get something back for Trevor Ariza as well. So, does this team want to do what they did last season and hold on to those guys and try to at least have a respectable record, or do they just go full tank? And I think that we might be closer to the full tank than we are to the let's be competitive version of the Thunder, but we'll just have to see. Depending on how good they are around the deadline, it might make more sense for them to kind of just try to keep some of these guys around, considering how many draft picks they have. They don't necessarily need to have a top 3 pick this season. So this is going to be something that's very interesting to watch, because OKC can go 2 directions here, just like they had the option to last year. They had a couple of they got 2 different ways they could go: tank or be competitive. And this season, I think they're leaning more one way than the other. But who knows here, right? Just who knows? We thought they were going to do it last season and they didn't. So maybe again the Thunder just decide to remain competitive, keep some of these veterans on the roster, and try to continue their winning culture, and show their young guys that it's important to try to win all the time rather than just committing to a tank job, because that also has value in itself, showing these young guys that the franchise is committed to winning, and showing them how to win, and how you react, how you act around a winning basketball team. But yeah, that's about all I have for you today on the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to, leave a comment letting me know what you think about the Thunder, what direction they might go this year, and are they still underrated? Can this team actually, be competitive this year, or are they just are we gonna see them, start to fizzle out as the season goes along? Love to hear from you down below. And remember that the videos this weekend will all be pre-recorded. And yeah, with all that said, I will see you guys in the next one.